Good morning, 11:30, and again, welcome to everyone joining us online. I am Katherine Chow. Back in July, I know it's a distant memory, but back in July, 1,600 people from the HTB congregation went to Focus this year. Focus is our annual church weekend away, and the theme of Focus this year was really anchored in the topic of prayer. We learned all about prayer over those 4 days away. And in the past month, I've heard so many encouraging stories of people who went to Focus this year and they encountered God's presence afresh. People went to Focus and they found a sense of community and family and friendship at church. People went to Focus and they talked about how their faith was reignited. And I think one of the things I've noticed since coming back is that I think there has been a hunger for prayer in this church. But I gotta say, of all the stories I've heard in the past month, I do have a favorite so far. There is a family at the 9:30 service here at Brompton Road, and they're a family of 4. And in this family, there are 2 children called Emiko, aged 7, and Sebastian, aged 5. And after Focus, I got a message from the mum of Emiko and Sebastian, and she basically said, thank you so much. The kids had an amazing time at Focus, and it was really clear that the kids' team had taught their children all about prayer at Focus, because this is what happened over the summer. As the family were driving in their car, in the back, Emiko, aged 7, said this about Sebastian, aged 5. She said this: "Dear Jesus, I'm sorry Sebastian is too busy to pray today. He does love you though." And I literally got that text and I have to say I laughed out loud because it was really funny. But when I thought about it, I was like, I think Emiko's prayer is for all of us. Dear Jesus, I'm sorry that I'm too busy to pray, but I do love you though. This week, I actually met up for coffee with someone I reconnected with at Focus. I had met my friend Lucy a year ago, and completely randomly in the Big Top, I bumped into Lucy. And I met Lucy a year ago. She had done Alpha 2 terms back. And when Focus finished, I said, look, when we get back from our summer holidays, let's get a date in the diary and let's go for coffee. So we went for coffee this week, and Lucy kind of told me, I'm really new to this God thing. I'm really just trying to figure my way out in my faith, and I've started to read the Bible more regularly, but I really want to learn how to hear and listen for God's voice. And then she looked at me and she goes, so how do you pray? And I wasn't really expecting her to ask me that, but in the moment I was like, I shared with her a couple of things in my own rhythm of prayer and a few things that people had told me that I'd found helpful. But when I got home, I did put my things down and I was like, oh, how did I learn how to pray? And as I look back on my life, of course, there have been so many people who have taught me how to pray and shown me how to pray, including my kids' pastor back in the day. But when I thought about it, I learned how to pray really by reading the words of Jesus in Matthew 6, verses 5 to 13. Because Jesus himself gives us the model of prayer in this passage. He says this: when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they've received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. And when you pray, do not keep on babbling like pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. This then is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. To be honest, I could have written 10 talks on prayer based on this passage because the theme and subject itself is so massive. But what I want to talk to you today is on how to pray when you don't know how to. How to pray if you don't know how to. This is for you if you are new to the Christian faith and you're just figuring your way around. Or if you have been someone of faith for a while, but in this season, God has felt really distant, but you want to rediscover your prayer life. Or maybe it's actually for those who are going through a really challenging season. And to be honest, the reality of your lives makes it such that you don't even know where to start with prayer because the pain that you experience daily is so real. Or maybe you're here today, a little bit like 5-year-old Sebastian. In the busyness and frenetic pace of London life, you want to learn how to pray a little bit better. And there are 3 things to remember when it comes to praying when you don't know how to. And these are the 3 things. Keep it real, keep it simple, keep it going. Keep it real, keep it simple, and keep it going. What do I mean when I say keep it real? What I mean is to pray with authenticity. Because the kind of prayer that Jesus is talking about is the kind of prayer where you can be real with God. Because God looks not at human appearances, but God is always looking at the heart. I love how Eugene Peterson says it like this. He says this: here's what I want you to do. Find a quiet, secluded place so you won't be tempted to role play before God. Just be there as simply and honestly as you can manage. And then the focus will shift from you to God, and you will begin to sense his grace. I love it. Where the shift starts to move from us to God. Did you feel it in the worship when we sang? Things started to shift from our problems to who we remember God is. This passage in prayer is anchored in Jesus' teaching on the Sermon on the Mount. And if you look at the context of this scripture, Jesus knew that in life, there were people who had it kind of all together on the surface. They knew how to pray in public, but the reality of their inner life, what was really going on inside, was not quite right. Like I said, the world cares about external appearances, but God always looks at the heart. You know, when I think about this morning, getting ready to come to church, I think about how much time I spent getting dressed, getting ready. So I showed up to church looking half decent. And then I think about how much time I spent preparing myself on the inside to meet with God. And when I do that analysis, that little calculation, I'm like, oh, that is a bit of a wake-up call, friends. How much time did I spend, putting my makeup on this morning? And how much time did I stay in the hidden place where it's just me and God? I think I get things wrong all the time. Sometimes I live my life consumed with what other people think, and not so much about what God cares about. This kind of prayer that Jesus is encouraging us to press into, it's the one-to-one with God, where it's all about your relationship. It's all about connection, and it's all about intimacy. It is the hidden space, the secret place where it's just you and God. And the thing is, private personal prayer is for no one else but God. If you want to get a sense check or a health check of how you're doing spiritually, you just have to have a think about how much time you spend alone with God every week. I personally find prayer really hard. I find it harder now than I ever have at any point in my life. I do think it's a struggle to carve out that space and then not to let anything or anyone else crowd it out. I mean, I have a daily battle with YouTube every single day. I wake up in the morning, I think today is a new day, it's gonna be different. And then before you know it, I get sucked into the vortex of YouTube Reels and random YouTube videos. And before you know it, I wake up, I look up and I'm like, oh my days, like a lot of time has gone and I've accomplished nothing. But that is something I think we need to fight for and take back in this season. It's not easy. And I think the way that we live in a culture of distraction and the way digital technology is, I guess, reshaping our brains, that struggle is real. But let me tell you this, prayer is the way you access God's presence. Prayer is the way you access God's peace. Prayer is the way you access God's perspective, and prayer is the way you access God's power. So if you want God's presence, God's peace, God's perspective, and his power, press in to the hidden place of your one-to-one with God. There is no substitute for it. Don't worry about public appearances. You know, prayer is not this optional add-on. It's not an app that you download for your life, but prayer is the operating system for your life. Let me tell you, it's the most important thing that you can do, and it is the most important thing that you can prioritize right now. Don't worry about how the prayers sound in public. Don't even worry about how you sing in public, because when the music fades, did you hear the sound of God's people singing? Just the voices. That is a beautiful sound. Be real. Pray with authenticity and prioritize the one-to-one space with God. Keep it real. Next, keep it simple. Keep it simple. And by that, I mean pray like a child. In the Message translation, it says this: the world is full of so-called prayer warriors who are prayer ignorant. They're full of formulas and programs and advice, peddling techniques for getting what you want from God. Don't fall for that nonsense. This is your Father you are dealing with, and he knows you better than you what you need. With a God like this loving you, you can pray very simply. You know, when you look at the Lord's Prayer, the first 50% of the Lord's Prayer is all about God. And then when you get halfway through, then we get to say, give us this day our daily need, our daily bread. Do you see prayer as a way to get things from God? Or do you see prayer as a way to access the very presence of God? Because there is a very distinct difference. How do we keep our prayer life simple? Pray like a child. You know, this week, I know a lot of the kids went back to school. I think everyone's posting photos of their kids going back to school in their uniforms. But in our family, I have an 11-year-old nephew called Theo. And it's a big week in our household because Theo started secondary school. And so on the group WhatsApp chat, my sister posted a picture of Theo in his school uniform getting ready to go to school. And I'm sure my mum wept a tear because she's like, my grandson, you know. But I don't know how 11 years flies by because I remember the day that kid was born. And on Tuesday at 7:17 a.m. in the morning, I got a text message from someone and the number I didn't recognize. And I looked at my phone and I looked at the text message and it said, hello, it's Theo. And I was like, part of me was like, oh my days, Theo is texting his favorite aunt. And I was like, immediately I was like, I always love hearing from the kids because, I love them so much. And as soon as I got that text, a part of me was like, oh my days. And I was like, Theo, what have you had for breakfast? Are you ready for school? Do you know any people at the school already? How are you feeling? Da, 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 da. And I became that kind of crazy aunt. But I was gonna do something. And then the other part of my brain kicked in and said, stop, pause, remember your cybersecurity training, awareness training. Remember, it could be a tech scam. So I was like, oh oh, yeah, how do I know? I mean, so I decided to text this person back. And I said, if you are Theo, tell me what your favorite food is. And he, within seconds, there was a text back that said, sweet and sour pork. And I was like, that's Theo. Because that kid, not only does he love sweet and sour pork, he loves my mum's sweet and sour pork. So I was like, at that sign, I was like, it's really Theo. And then my sister messaged me and said, because Theo's going to secondary school, we've given him a brick phone. They allowed a brick phone and they can contact their family members. So there I was like, I was texting away. I was like, I think something just came over me and I just thought to myself, this is amazing. Now we can text anytime. I mean, there's no time of day where he can't text me and I'll be like texting him back immediately, like, what's going on, kid? Like, and I suddenly, like, overwhelmed by my nephew texting me, I had a thought that came in my mind. And even though I'm a very broken human being and I love him so much, I think every time you turn your heart to God in prayer, and you simply say to him, hi, God, it's me. The Father's heart erupts with love for you. The delight, the joy, the overwhelming eruption of happiness that encompasses the Father's heart, I find overwhelming to even talk about. But that is God, how God feels when you turn to him, when you reach out to him, when you just shoot one up and you're like, Lord, it's me. And the beautiful thing with God is, like, it doesn't matter how long it's been. It doesn't matter whether you haven't been in touch for a while. It doesn't matter how challenging things have been in your life. It doesn't even matter how much you've messed up. Every time you say, hi, God, it's me, the Father's heart erupts with love. Because that is the kind of relationship that Jesus has bought for you on the cross. That kind of access and that kind of relationship. When you pray, it is not transactional. You don't pray to God as your line manager or your boss. You pray to him as your Father. It is a relational thing. You know, I don't know how you feel about talking about to your line manager at work, but maybe you're like cautious, guarded, a little bit anxious. I better say this in the right way. God is not your line manager. You come to him as a child and you say, here I am. It's me. So keep it real and keep it simple. And then keep it going. Pray continuously. You know, in life, the reality is you'll be shaped by your habits, your practices, and your rhythms and your disciplines. If you want to get fit, you go to the gym and you work out. I do not go to the gym and I do not work out. But if you want to grow your prayer muscle, if you want to keep your spiritual life alive, if you want to have the kind of relationship with God that he wants to have with you, you've got to put some things in place. The thing that I love about prayer is that you really can pray anytime, any place, anywhere. You know, sometimes I'm at the bus stop and it's like, 6 minutes before the bus comes. And I'm like, okay, hi God, it's me. And then you just start talking. Like, I mean, I think I just talk like I would talk to my dad, who isn't here anymore. But that's the kind of intimacy. You can pray anytime, any place, anywhere, because he is a good Father. And in July of this year, I went to a Benedictine abbey, which is a little bit like a monastery. And this abbey was built in the 10th century, and it is an ancient place of prayer. And there is a group of nuns who lives in this abbey. And I went there to learn more about prayer. And I don't know if you've seen the movie Sister Act. It's a little bit like Sister Act. And I'm not going to lie, I did feel a little bit like Whoopi Goldberg. Not because there are criminal gangsters out to get me, but I got there and I was like, oh, this is really different. I feel very different. But the nuns in this monastery they've chosen to live their life under this motto, which is pray constantly. That's the motto of the nuns. And they've dedicated themselves to a life of prayer, simplicity, and hospitality. And the rhythm of prayer they have is they gather 7 times a day to pray. And if you are in the Abbey, you'll hear a bell ring, and that means that prayer is going to start in 5 minutes. And then at 6 a.m., 9 a.m., 12 noon, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, they pray together in the chapel, and they not only speak their prayers, but they sing their prayers. And as a visitor, you can join in to the chapel, and you can join in quietly. And it really was quite an extraordinary experience. And the thing with this monastery is you're supposed to be silent. You're supposed to embrace the practices of solitude, and you're basically not supposed to be chatting because you're meant to be praying. But one day I was walking around in the garden and I saw a nun, and she smiled at me, and I thought, okay, that's a sign that I can go and talk to her. So I went up to her and we started chatting, and I said, when did you arrive in the Abbey? And she said, I arrived in the Abbey in 1968, and I've been living this life of prayer for over 50 years. And she just had a presence and a peace about her that was so attractive. And I was a bit cheeky, and I was actually quite curious. And I said, sister, is there a TV here in the Abbey? And yeah, how does it work here? And she said, well, there is one nun who every morning goes to a computer and she goes on the interwebs and she reads the news headlines. And then this nun comes and speaks to all the sisters and tells us what's happening in the world. And that update shapes our prayers for the day. So the nuns pray for the world. And the nuns actually do watch TV once a year on a special occasion. I was like, oh yeah, what day is that? She was like, on Christmas Day, they're allowed to watch the King's speech, and that's it. And I was like, these are seriously holy women, and they are not messing around. But you'll be pleased to know, I personally am not called to be a nun. Okay, that much I will say. But I did come away from that experience, and I was really struck by this dedication and commitment and rhythm of prayer. And when I came back to London, I was like, I think I want to put some things in place to ensure that I have a pattern of prayer that can help me to grow in this area of my life. You know, like I said earlier, the one-to-one private prayer is really important. Make no mistake about that. But there was something I saw at the Abbey where people prayed in community that was really powerful. And that is why this week, at the start of term, we're committing to praying every single day. We're praying here at Brompton Road on Tuesday night. Please come and join us as we pray and worship for Kingdom Come. But every morning on Zoom, we'll be dialing in, and it doesn't matter, cameras off is okay. Mute is okay. Sometimes I have to tell you, I join in on the 7:30 prayer Zoom, and I often don't have any words, but then I'll hear someone else praying, and I'll be like, yes, Lord, of that. And there are so many ways that you can engage. If you scan the QR code and you're kind of more of a one-to-one person, you can just download the prayer update for the day, and then on your own you can pray, because God hears those prayers. But if you'd like, we would love to kick off the start of this new term with a real hunger to press into prayer. Jesus himself says, where 2 or 3 gather in my name, there I am with them. So keep it real, keep it simple, keep it going. Pray authentically, pray like a child, and pray continuously. And I want to end this talk by sharing with you 2 quotes that I read over the summer period. The first is from Charles Spurgeon, the famous Baptist preacher, who said this: "If you can only sigh before the Lord, then you have really prayed, and God has heard your prayer." I'm really struck by the fact that for many people, it's not been an easy season. But if you can sigh before God, you have prayed. If you only have tears to weep before God, you have prayed. You know, personally, I've had a pretty challenging week this week. But as I was reflecting on, what do I do with this pain, God? I felt God say, I want you to process everything in your life with me and turn it into prayer. Because I am a God who hears your cries for help. You know, the most powerful thing you can do with your pain is to process it with God and turn it into prayer. I thought that my holiday in August was going to be super relaxing, super peaceful, super tranquil. But on the first day of my holiday, I turned the TV on, and I saw the riots happening in this country. And my heart was so heavy by what I saw in this nation. How can this be happening? What is going on? And immediately, the pragmatic part of my brain kicked in and was like, we've got to respond to this. We've got to address this. We need a 10-point plan. We've got to call this out. I also realized I was on holiday. So I was a little bit like, I don't know what to do. But then I read this quote from the Swiss theologian Karl Barth, who said this: "To clasp the hands in prayer is the beginning of an uprising against the disorder of the world." You know, when we pray for the world every week, we're not praying to a powerless God. We are praying to a God who has the power to break chains. I'm praying to a God who has the power to bring peace. And in the moments when I don't even know what to pray, I simply pray, your kingdom come and your will be done. Lord, have mercy on our world. We are living in at a time where there is so much going on. But our first response as the people of God is to pray before we act. Tim Keller, the American pastor, says this: "The people who are characterized by a radical interiority have the most courageous, visionary engagement with the world. People who have an incredible inner life of prayer, their lives are marked by a buoyant, generous engagement with the needs of the world." Friends, it is time to pray. Because it hasn't felt quite as chaotic and confused as it has done, as it feels now. I deeply believe that history belongs to the intercessors. How do you pray when you don't know how? Keep it real, keep it simple, and keep it going. Let's pray.